I really love aquarium plants. They're so beautiful. They help to purify the water, so I don't have to do water changes as much, but I personally find them a little bit harder to take care of compared to fish. So if you've got a black thumb like me, let me tell you about some of the ways that I have killed plants so that you won't have to. For my dwarf aquarium lily, a lovely plant, comes with a bulb. I found out that they definitely like a lot of root tabs, so that would be the first way that if you see the leaves are starting to get holes or are melting, try to put more root tabs in and see if that helps. However, if you have a tank like this one that is full of floating plants, another way that you can get your lily plant to die is if they're not getting enough light. So it will send up lily pads up to the surface, and you want to make sure that the floating plants aren't so crowded that they're not getting enough light. Speaking of floating plants, they too need a lot of light or else it'll melt away. But another thing that makes them melt away is actually if the current is too strong. So I actually had a sponge filter that apparently the air pump was too powerful for them. And so they ended up melting away from the bubbles that were popping. And then once I switched out the air pump to something a little bit weaker, then they did just fine. Amazon swords, or really any plant that needs to be rooted firmly in the ground, when you first get them and you put them in, make sure that you help block them off from any fish that will dig them up or accidentally bump them away, because I had some dwarf chain loaches that are just, pretty active fish. They tend to dwell on the bottom, and they just kept hitting this sword plant so that it would float up, and it never really got a chance to develop because of that. Also, Anubias. Anubias is one of those plants that has a rhizome, meaning that you don't want to bury it into the substrate, and instead you can attach it to driftwood or rocks. And one of the ways you can attach it is super glue. Very, very effective. However, make sure you don't cover that rhizome entirely with super glue, or otherwise it will suffocate and may end up melting away and dying. Instead, I like to apply the super glue to the roots of the Anubias and then push it down and then leave that rhizome completely free of glue. Cryptocoryne plants, absolutely beautiful, does well in low light. However, they really don't like to be moved. Whether you're moving them to a different location or you're putting root tabs under them and it kind of causes it to shift, this will cause some of their more fragile, skinnier roots to break, and they become very unhappy when that happens. I also had another case with crypts where I had the light on too strong for them when they were mostly a low light plant. The tank was not balanced and they ended up becoming completely covered in hair algae, which will prevent the leaves from photosynthesizing, and therefore the plant can't grow or live well. Stem plants, on the other hand, while you can plant them into the ground, sometimes because they're such a fast-growing plant, they have a harder time with the conversion process. So you may have heard of, a lot of these plants that we grow in aquariums, they actually are grown on the plant farms as out of the water or immerse grown. And then we take them to our tank and then we plunge them down into the water, and then they have to convert into submerged grown or underwater grown leaves. And stem plants can really suffer and even completely melt away to the point where you have no plant left. So to help them out with this conversion process, a lot of times I will float the stems at the surface of the tank so that they can get lots of light, lots of carbon dioxide directly from the air. The stem will grow, and then they'll grow roots kind of all along the stem. Once it's nice and big and healthy, then I will consider planting it into the ground, and it has a better chance of surviving because it actually has roots. Speaking of stem plants, one of my favorite one is Pogostem encellatus octopus, because it has those nice long tendrils that grow out, great hiding place for little baby fish. That is how, it was the first time I ever discovered that I had a mineral deficiency in my soft water. So the tops of the leaves of that Pogostem encellatus ended up twisting, which is a classic sign of calcium deficiency. And then once I added some C-Chem equilibrium into my basically fertilization routine, never had that problem ever again. So it didn't really kill the plant, but definitely the tops of the leaves of the stem plant weren't doing great. And then the last one, Java fern, classic beginner plant that a lot of people, including me, have had problems with because the leaves keep turning black or brown. And there's a lot of reasons why this might happen. For me personally, I needed to start feeding a really good all-in-one liquid fertilizer, for example, like Easy Green, that has lots of potassium in it, because apparently Java fern really likes potassium, and the bigger it gets, the more it needs this. And to the point where I ended up getting a potassium extra supplement to add on top of to my all-in-one fertilizer. And once I did that, it started growing really well and green. Now, I don't want to scare you from getting aquarium plants in the first place, so make sure you check out my 5 things I wish I knew when buying new aquarium plants. Take time to enjoy your aquariums, and I'll see you in the next video.